Moments ago, President Obama wrapped up that bilateral meeting with China's President Xi Jinping. This is part of the second day of talks at President Obama's fourth and final nuclear summit. This, of course, comes as fears of nuclear terrorism are on the rise and the concern that the Islamic State could get its hands on nuclear weapons or nuclear material to build some sort of dirty bomb. How does this change our approach to fighting the terrorist group? Joining me now, Fox News military analyst and retired U.S. Navy Captain Chuck Nash. Captain Nash, whose side are the Chinese on?
Well, I think they're on their own side. They don't want Islamists to get any kind of nuclear device because they're dealing with the problem in the western part of their own country with the Uyghurs. And so we had some of those folks locked up in Gitmo until about a year or two ago.
Sorry, can I interrupt you? Can you tell our viewers what Uyghurs are?
Yes, they are Muslims that live in the western part of China up against where Afghanistan connects to the Chinese border. It's out in that area there. And they have been a problem inside China. The Chinese consider them a terrorist group. They've staged raids and other bombings and things like that inside of China. So the Chinese government has zero tolerance for these folks. Okay,
that's good to clarify because we never know what the Chinese are thinking. Let's get to ISIS. Let's get to Muslim extremists and the fact that it was just about a year ago that Moldovan police, closer to Eastern Europe, right, and the FBI stopped 4 attempts by Russian smugglers to sell nuclear material to extremists in the Middle East. In fact, on that video that you see, they specifically had told undercover agents, we'll sell to Muslims because they want to kill Americans. How close is ISIS to getting its hands on nuclear weaponry or material?
I think they're very close to getting their hands on nuclear material because there's so much of it out there. There are literally tens of thousands of sources in 100 countries plus. And all you have to do is go to certain industrial sites or to medical facilities where you have radiological equipment, and you can get a hold of it. Down in Brazil, there were 4 people who died from cesium salt that was taken out of a medical device. And that was just a year or so ago. So that stuff is out there. It's simply a matter of time, Liz, and that's why the pressure is on all of the intelligence communities and why all of these intelligence communities need to talk with each other and share that information back and forth, just like has happened in Moldova.
Well, you could then leapfrog from ISIS and the material and the possibility to North Korea. They've had surprise launches. They claim they are, you know, hydrogen bombs. That's all questionable, but they clearly have some type of capability. Who is more worrisome to you, the North Koreans or ISIS?
Oh, good question. The North Koreans are on a dedicated path to developing intercontinental ballistic missiles with nuclear warheads. That is scary, especially for a nutjob regime as the North Koreans are. But they're somewhat reasonable and they're somewhat rational in that they know if they were to ever do something or start a war with the South, they would be annihilated very quickly. ISIS, on the other hand, is a group that is trying to bring about the end of days. So they don't care. Deterrence does not work with a group like that. Deterrence may not work with Iran, depending on how radical they get. And sometimes we're having a hard time trying to figure out, are they rational or are they irrational? And I could argue both sides of that equation. So it's better to deal with a rational enemy than it is an enemy that believes that their destiny is to bring about the end of days.
And that brings us to Putin. You could argue he's the most rational of all of them at this point.
Absolutely.
But, he is now saying, and the Kremlin is now saying, that there was no deal with the United States, as Secretary Kerry had mentioned earlier, that perhaps Assad would step down out of Syrian leadership. What now? How does that impact relations with Russia going forward?
Well, this is not the first time that the State Department has said one thing and then the people from the other side of the table went, what? No, that never happened. So it really gets confusing on who to believe. I would like to automatically believe our own side, but sometimes I think they hear the rhetoric and then because they've said it, they believe it to be so, and therefore it is, and maybe it isn't. But as far as dealing with the Russians going forward, they are hard bargainers. They are really tough. They always have been, and you have to be able to be willing to walk from the table, just as President Reagan did in Reykjavik. So if you don't get the deal that you want, you walk. And if you don't have the guts to do that, you shouldn't have sat down at the table in the first place.
Captain Chuck Nash, thank you very much for educating us on so much. You are in the know, definitely. We appreciate it.
Well, thank you, Liz.
Anytime. Close.